This is Chapter 2 of Rick Riordan's The Sea of Monsters. And the title is I Play Dodgeball with Cannibals. My day started normal, or as normal as it ever gets at Meriwether College Prep. See, it's this progressive school in downtown Manhattan, which means we sit on beanbag chairs instead of at desks, and we don't get grades, and the teachers wear jeans and rock concert t-shirts to work. That's all cool with me. I mean, I'm ADHD and dyslexic, like most half-bloods, so I'd never done that great in regular school even before they kicked me out. The only bad thing about Meriwether was that the teachers always looked on the bright side of things, and the kids weren't always, well, bright. Take my first class today, English. The whole middle school had read the book called Lord of the Flies, where all these kids got marooned on an island and go psycho. So for our final exam, our teachers sent us into the break yard to spend an hour with no adult supervision to see what would happen. What happened was a massive wedgie contest between the 7th and 8th graders, 2 pebble fights, and a full tackle basketball game. The school bully, Matt Sloane, led most of these activities. Sloane wasn't big or strong, but he acted like he was. He had eyes like a pit bull and shaggy black hair, and he always dressed in expensive but sloppy clothes, like he wanted everyone to see how little he cared about his family's money. One of his front teeth was chipped from the time he'd taken his daddy's Porsche for a joyride and run into a "Please slow down for children" sign. Anyway, Sloane was giving everybody wedgies until he made the mistake of trying it on my friend Tyson. Tyson was the only homeless kid at Meriwether College Prep. As near as my mom and I could figure, he'd been abandoned by his parents when he was very young, probably because he was so different. He was 6'3" and built like the abominable snowman, but he cried a lot and was scared of just about everything, including his own reflection. His face was kind of misshapen and brutal looking. I couldn't tell you what color his eyes were because I could never make myself look higher than his crooked teeth. His voice was deep, but he talked funny, like a much younger kid. I guess because he'd never gone to school before coming to Meriwether. He wore tattered jeans, grimy size 20 sneakers, and a plaid flannel shirt with holes in it. He smelled like a New York City alleyway because that's where he lived, and a cardboard refrigerator box off 72nd Street. Meriwether Prep had adopted him as a community service project so all the students could feel good about themselves. Unfortunately, most of them couldn't stand Tyson. Once they discovered that he was a big softie, despite his massive strength and his scary looks, they made themselves feel good by picking on him. I was pretty much his only friend, which meant that he was my only friend. My mom had complained to the school a million times that they weren't doing enough to help him. She'd called social services, but nothing ever seemed to happen. The social workers claimed Tyson didn't exist. They swore up and down that they'd visited the alley we described and couldn't find him, though how you miss a giant kid living in a refrigerator box, I don't know. Anyway, Matt Sloane snuck up behind him and tried to give him a wedgie, and Tyson panicked. He swatted Sloane away a little too hard. Sloane flew 15 feet and got tangled in the kid's tire swing. "You freak!" Sloane yelled. "Why don't you go back to your cardboard box?" Tyson started sobbing. He sat down on the jungle gym so hard he bent the bar and buried his head in his hands. "Take it back, Sloane," I shouted. Sloane just sneered at me. "Why do you even bother, Jackson? You might have friends if you weren't always sticking up for that freak." I balled my fists. I hope my face wasn't as red as it felt. "He's not a freak. He's just..." I tried to think of the right thing to say, but Sloane wasn't listening. He and his big, ugly friends were too busy laughing. I wondered if it were my imagination or if Sloane had more goons hanging around him than usual. I was used to seeing him with 2 or 3, but today he had like half a dozen more, and I was pretty sure I'd never seen them before. "Just wait till PE, Jackson," Sloane called. "You are dead." When first period ended, our English teacher, Mr. DeMilo, came outside to inspect the carnage. He pronounced that we'd understood Lord of the Flies perfectly. We all passed his course, and we should never, never grow up to be violent people. Matt Sloane nodded earnestly, and then gave me a chip-toothed grin. I had to promise to buy Tyson an extra peanut butter sandwich at lunch to get him to stop sobbing. I am freak?" he asked me. "No," I promised, gritting my teeth. "Matt Sloane is the freak." Tyson sniffled. "You are a good friend. Miss you next year, if I can't..." His voice trembled. I realized he didn't know if he'd be invited back next year for the community service project. I wondered if the headmaster had even bothered talking to him about it. "Hey, don't worry, big guy. I managed. Everything's going to be fine. Tyson gave me such a grateful look. I felt like a big liar. How could I promise a kid like him that anything would be fine? Our next exam was science. Mrs. Tesla told us that we had to mix chemicals until we succeeded in making something explode. Tyson was my lab partner. His hands were too big for the tiny vials we were supposed to use. He accidentally knocked a tray of chemicals off the counter and made an orange mushroom cloud in the trash can. After Mrs. Tesla evacuated the lab and called the hazardous waste removal squad, she praised Tyson and me for being natural chemists. We were the first ones who'd ever aced our exam in under 30 seconds. I was glad the morning went fast because it kept me from thinking too much about my problems. I couldn't stand the idea that something might be wrong at camp. Even worse, I couldn't shake the memory of my bad dream. I had a feeling that Grover was in danger. In social studies, while we were drawing latitude-longitude maps, I opened my notebook and stared at the photo inside. My friend Annabeth, on vacation in Washington, D.C. She was wearing jeans and a denim jacket over her orange Camp Half-Blood t-shirt. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a bandana. She was standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial with her arms crossed, looking extremely pleased with herself. She liked she'd personally designed the place. See, Annabeth wants to be an architect when she grows up, so she's always visiting famous monuments and stuff. She's weird that way. She's emailed me the picture after spring break, and every once in a while I'd look at it just to remind myself that she was real and Camp Half-Blood hadn't just been in my imagination. I wished Annabeth were here. She'd know what to make of my dream. I'd never admit it to her, but she was smarter than me, even if she was annoying sometimes. I was about to close my notebook when Matt Sloane reached over and ripped the photo out of the rings. "Hey," I protested. Sloane checked out the picture, and his eyes got wide. "No way, Jackson. Who is that? She is not your..." "Give it back." My ears felt hot. Sloane handed the photo to his ugly buddies, who snickered and started ripping it up to make spitwads. They were new kids who must have been visiting because they were all wearing those stupid "Hi, my name is" tags from the admissions office. They must have had a weird sense of humor, too, because they'd all filled in strange names like Marrow, Sucker, Skull Eater, and Joe Bob. No human beings had names like that. "These guys are moving here next year," Sloane bragged like that was supposed to scare me. "I bet they can pay the tuition, too, unlike your freak friend." "He's not a freak." I had to try really, really hard not to punch Sloane in the face. "You're such a loser, Jackson. Good thing I'm going to put you out of your misery next period." His huge buddies chewed up my photo. I wanted to pulverize them, but I was under strict orders from Chiron never to take my anger out on regular mortals, no matter how obnoxious they were. I had to save my fighting for monsters. Still, part of me thought, if Sloane only knew who I really was. The bell rang. As Tyson and I were leaving class, a girl's voice whispered, "Percy!" I looked around the locker area, but nobody was paying me any attention. Like any girl at Merriweather would ever be caught dead calling my name. Before I had time to consider whether or not I'd been imagining things, a crowd of kids rushed for the gym, carrying Tyson and me along with them. It was time for PE. Our coach had promised us a free-for-all dodgeball game, and Matt Sloane had promised to kill me.